My name's Mooley MIA. I'm a writer, and I was here today at Oldham Gallery on the panel, and we were debating what's slavery got to do with us now.
So how did you first get involved in the project?
Well, I heard about Revealing Histories when it was first being set up in 2007, and I did go for a job in conversation with, but didn't get it because I wasn't fully aware of the system and how museums and galleries work, which I thought was quite unfortunate at the time because I do feel that I had a lot to offer. What quite surprised me at the beginning of Revealing Histories was the lack of usage, I would say, of local people that know about slavery, about abolition of slavery, that have got an involvement in it either through their own writing or through the work that they've done, and that didn't seem to have been brought on board at the beginning. Obviously it's been remedied since.
And do you think that would have kind of changed that shape of the overall project?
It would have done in the way that using local people that have already got networks that are in place would have brought other people into galleries, people that don't normally go there. And I think that's what it was about. I've been around a few of the galleries, in Manchester in particular, and in one of them, the only thing I've seen about Revealing Histories was a sticker on the wall next to a tiger that was actually an Indian tiger, and that was their contribution to Revealing Histories, and that's a little bit worrying.
That was the Manchester Art Gallery, was it? Yeah, I thought
You've been there.
It was subtle. Should we say subtle?
Yeah. But also, I found at the Museum of Science and Industry, I took some people there on a trip, and I was disappointed that I didn't see anything about slavery, because I'm not disappointed. It's just that they've got the textile mills, they've got all that machinery, and they know where the cotton came from, but they chose not to bring that into light. They didn't want to reveal that history for whatever reasons.
So the last thought there was how things might have changed if you'd have been possibly taken on board, or
not myself, but different people that are in Manchester that know about black history. Black people would have been very useful right at the beginning, I think, and finding out their opinions. I know that when I went for the interview, one of the things that came up was, well, you know, people are going to be, Jamaican people in particular, they're going to be very sensitive about this issue. How are you going to deal with them so that we don't upset them? And it's almost as though there was a fear of what could come out of this. We're talking about abolition, we're celebrating something which, incidentally, 2007, I'm not quite sure it was the right time to do it, because it was actually 1833 before we saw any real changes, and even then, no absolute changes until 1860.
Because we also found that with one or two people that we did speak to who were kind of youth workers or teachers working with younger black students who felt that way as well, that, you know, if they could have accessed a network, a community network that existed, that they had contacts and connections with, and it could just have meant, well, one, a load more people are attending events, and hopefully a kind of more high rev debate about what the whole thing was in terms of relevance and all the things.
I think it's fair. I think it's very, very British in that we don't want to remember, we don't want to be looking back, we don't want somebody to turn around and say, actually, this is what you did. Because we have a very British way about us in that, okay, we did that, but actually we made it okay because we got Sierra Leone, we got Freetown, we put people in there, and we took slaves and we stopped the ships from going. Actually, it was the British ships that you were stopping and putting the slaves in Freetown, having taken them from their own land, and that makes it okay. And this is just a very British way of doing things, of softening it, so that we don't have to look at our dirty past. The debate in the family, with my son in particular, is that he moves with a group of young people that don't see colour, which is great, which is fantastic, which is what we want to a point within the country. But I also want him to acknowledge his past. His father was Jamaican, so his grandparents were Jamaican, so they're coming from slaves. And before the Liverpool Museum moved, when it was down in the bottom, in the basement in the Maritime Museum, it was quite horrifying to go through there because you had the smells of the slave ships, or how they imagined that they smelled, and you had the whales, and I took him when he was maybe 10 and he wasn't impressed. So I can't get him to go again to have another look because I'm saying, no, come on, you need to come and see that. Oh, no, I don't. What do I need to see it for? And it hurts. Even at 18, and though he doesn't talk about it to me, it hurts that that happened, and he doesn't want to have to look at that. Now, if education was better, and that's why I love the name Revealing Histories. If histories were revealed earlier, if they were just part of our history, because slave history, African history, is part of British history, and there's no getting away from it. And had he been educated in that way through school, because I always say things to him, but I'm his mother, so he doesn't like to listen. But had it always been there, it would have been natural, and yes, still painful, but acceptable. Black young people that have been accepted, especially, let's say, Manchester, where Chorlton area, you've got an absolute mix and an absolute multicultural melting pot, and it's absolutely wonderful. And they don't want to address things, they don't want to stand out with that difference. They don't want to say, well, actually, yes, that was in our past, because they want to be part of the bigger things. And it's difficult. How do you get the level? How do you educate our young people? On both sides, on the white and the black side, how do you get them to understand, well, this is what happened and this is our past. It doesn't change what we're doing now. We are getting on and we are moving on, but we still need to know about our past.
You know, whether or not it might also be then kind of playing into racist ideology where, you know, white racists might well see it, yeah, that was... We want to bring back that history. Do you know what I mean? It's
quite an interesting point, that, actually, because what happened before the transatlantic slave trade, when the British were going into Africa, they saw that the Africans had systems set up. They had a kind of social system in that within a village, everybody would be equal, everybody would have a good job, everybody would look after the elderly, everybody would look after the children, and these systems were in place. They had their own systems in place. To then start to say, oh, actually, these people are really ignorant and they deserve to be slaves because they don't know anything, because they're ignorant, because they're cannibals, because they're this, because they're that. That was their excuses that was brought in, and that's obviously what we're still seeing today. But all the systems were in place, and the British knew that they were in place, and they traded with those people before the slave trade came in, and they traded with those people after the slave trade. You know, so it's a really difficult subject that people can use it and say, well, yes, you know, you were slaves because you were ignorant, because you were cannibals, because you were pagans, because you didn't know anything, because you weren't British. But they're basically saying you didn't have the British system, so therefore you didn't have any system. Actually, while Africa had a system in place, Britain didn't. Britain was still scrubbing around.